All right. I think today's passage is going to be helpful. Today's passage is going to be helpful as we think about being the church in times like this. Okay, so I need somebody to read 1 Thessalonians 5, 1 to 15, the 15 verses. So what's up on the screen? Would somebody feel comfortable just jumping in and reading that?
I'll do it.
Thank you. Let me give you a mic also. So it's the 15 verses.
Oh, wait, I don't have it. I'll read it. I got it. Okay, you want the 15?
Okay.
1 to 15, I got it. Now, brothers, about times and dates, we do not need to write to you, for you know very well that the day of the Lord will come like a thief in the night. While people are saying peace and safety, destruction will come on them suddenly, as labor pains on a pregnant woman, and they will not escape. But you, brothers, are not in darkness, so that this day should surprise you like a thief. You are all sons of light and sons of the day. We do not belong to the night or to the darkness. So then let us not be like others who are asleep, but let us be alert and self-control. For those who sleep at night, and those who get drunk at night. But since we belong to the day, let us be self-controlled, putting on faith and love as a breastplate, and the hope of salvation as a helmet. For God did not appoint us to suffer wrath, but to receive salvation through our Lord Jesus Christ. He died for us so that whether we are awake or asleep, we may live together with him. Therefore, encourage one another, build each other up, just as in fact you are doing. Now we ask you, brothers.
That's it.
Okay, that's it? 11.
Yep, go ahead. I'm sorry, I cut you off to 15.
Now we ask you, brothers, to respect those who work hard among you, who are over you in the Lord, and who admonish you.
We got to make sure and get that one in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hold them in the highest regard in love because of their work. Live in peace with each other. And we urge you, brothers, warn those who are idle. Encourage the timid, help the weak, be patient with everyone. Make sure that nobody pays back wrong for wrong, but always try to be kind to each other and to everyone else.
All right, thank you. All right, so it began with one. All right, thank you. All right, so it began with one last reference to the second coming of Christ. If you heard the message 2 weeks ago or the devotional I sent out last time, I talked about this 1 Corinthians 4 text, which is the primary text. Gives us the summary of the second coming of Christ and of course, all the related events with that. So one last time, he's kind of making that don't forget the point of what I told you in chapter 4. And that is that, about times and dates, we do not need to write you. And it's not because they told them and it's accomplished. Rather, for you know well that the day of the Lord will come like a thief in the night. And then he gives the other image of the woman in the pains of childbirth. It's going to happen. And so, I don't know. Gosh, I wish that Amber Alert thing would just finish on it already. Maybe it's happening. Yeah. Well, Lynn's looking like maybe if you can do something, but don't. But yeah, I'll just keep preaching. Yeah. Yeah. Or you could turn them off. Let's turn them down. Mine hasn't done it, actually. But okay, turn all your phones off. This will be kind of cool. The idea of me preaching and not people looking at their phones is a really cool idea. You can hear what I'll be saying scripture-wise. I'm going to have them on the screen. So, yeah, turn your phones off is a great idea. For the next 25 minutes. Unplug. Yeah, Leia's all into it. All right. So, I guess the thing that's the point here is the apostles want people to know You just need to know the main thing. He's coming again, and everything's it's going to be glorious. And stop speculating. Stop getting distracted. I think if he were alive today, if Jesus were physically here today, talking, he would say, stop writing books about when the second coming is going to be. Stop making movies about it. I mean, I don't know how much clearer he can say it. Is it this whole cottage industry of end-of-the-world-ism, which started really in the 70s, and just hasn't abated. It's just new people make lots of money on all this, is not what they had in mind. When they gave the summary in chapter 4, it's like, this is all you need to know. This is it, the last word. So look back at chapter 4 if you missed that, and I can give you, what I said on that if that's helpful to you. So instead, the apostles are saying to the church in Thessalonica, stay focused on God's mission. So I guess that's in the building stuff. So if you can, go. Thank you, honey. So, stay focused on God's mission. Don't be going to conferences and all that, concerned about, when can he get us out of here? Your mission is to be Jesus Christ in the world till he says we're done. And apparently, since it's been 2,000 years, he's not in a hurry. I want to step out on a limb and say he's not in a hurry. Maybe some of you saw this bumper sticker, and Jesus is coming. Look busy. Now that's a little sarcastic. What do you think? A little? But I'd like you to turn to somebody where you are right now and just look at it. Turn and look at somebody. You guys look, and say, Jesus is coming, look busy. All right. Now, having contrived and manipulated you to do that, I would say that's not exactly what they meant. That's not exactly the best translation of it. But there is an aspect of, stay on task that is true about that silly bumper sticker. And so to really explain what they meant, the apostles set up a very interesting comparison, as we heard Reese read it. I'm going to reread verses 4, and since you turned your phones off, you can just listen to me. But you, brothers, are not in the darkness, so that this day should surprise you like a thief. You are all children of the light and children of the day. We do not belong to the night or to the darkness. So then, let us not be like others who are asleep, but let us be alert and self-controlled. For those who sleep, sleep at night, and those who get drunk at night. Now, this is not the point of this text, not to pick on people who drink, and if they might have had one too many. Though there's a little bit of that there. He's using a metaphor, because obviously sleep is a good thing, right? Sleep is supposed to sleep. But he's taken a double metaphor. And Lewis, if you put that up there, the next one. So basically, he's saying, you have an identity. You before you choose what you do with your time, because you have been brought to faith in Jesus Christ, and you are putting your trust in him, even if it's a mustard seed of faith. You are his child. You are a child of the light and a child of the day. In contrast, you do not belong to the night or to the darkness. I'm a night person, so I don't think it's inherently evil to be of the night, but he's using a metaphor, okay, of light and darkness here. So then, so who we are, you're a son or daughter of the Most High King is what I talked about in one series repeatedly. It was from 1 John. But then you get to choose how you live, because it's not an automatic thing. You can be somebody but not act like the person you are. So this is called a little grammar. This is the indicative. The indicative is who you are. The imperative is where you have choices. How you live, how we live. So then, let us not be like others who are asleep, but let us be awake and sober. So you see the comparison that he's making. Now, this issue of you being somebody but not necessarily acting like somebody is sort of been illustrated very powerfully this week. Who are the two famous people that we've been memorializing this week?
John McCain.
And Aretha Franklin, yeah. So let's start with Aretha. We've heard, I mean, many of us knew these kind of things, but you get reminded or you learn more through the memorials and whatever you pick up, the highlights, the news. What were significant influences in Aretha Franklin's formation as probably the greatest vocalist of our time?
Church choir.
Church choir, gospel music. Her father was a pastor of Strong Church. She was a musician. She sang her first song at like 5, age 4 or 5. Yeah. So that was formative for Aretha. She's not the only one, but that was formative for her. It was, she kind of, you know, when she was a 5-year-old girl, she didn't have any choice. You're going to go to church. You're going to sing, girl, you know, but she chose to invest herself in it. She liked it. She was obviously gifted and talented and developed the gift, which transcended not only gospel music, but kind of brought the good news to all kinds of music. And then we heard a lot about John McCain. Now, what were the formative influences that were repeated again for who John McCain has been? His military background. Prisoner of war, but even I'm even going back before the very earliest. His father, and what about his father, Sandy?
His belief in God.
Perhaps, I don't know as much about that, but perhaps, but I think his father was an admiral. And his grandfather was an admiral. This man was, you know, depending on how you felt about it, incredibly lucky or incredibly unlucky, you know, to be a third and have the expectations on him. And some of you saw I put it on my personal Facebook page. I did not know, maybe she told me, and I did not know my mother quadruple dated with John McCain. In fact, what I didn't put on Facebook, if you want to go back and give a Facebook page, it was actually for 6 months. You know, she was going to Mary Washington College in Virginia, and they were at Annapolis, you know, and so, you know, this is back in the mid-50s, and so these young men would actually arrange for these 4 young women to come. So she was constantly in the company with John McCain. I had no idea. I mean, she mentioned it, that she knew John McCain from way back. And she said his roommate was Charles Larson, who became one of those decorated 4-star admirals. And her boyfriend for the 6 months was a guy named Carl. She didn't tell me how Carl ended up. Because maybe my dad, who's been paying attention to all this, she met later, is, you know, aware of all this kind of stuff. So, you know, it's just a really neat story. She said, by the way, you know, of course, you know what I wanted to ask my mom, but didn't ask. You know, were you breaking rules with John McCain at that point? You know, she kept emphasizing that they had to march to church. They actually met at church, and it was like 1956. It was very regimented. But she said he was silly and goofy. He was the social organizer of the 8 of them. So anyway, she and Carl lost interest in each other, and she never heard of John McCain again until he was a POW. You know, so. But the point being that John McCain had this incredible influence, just like Aretha Franklin, on who he was. But did John McCain act like who he was, you know, in those early years of his life? No. By his own admission, particularly when he got to Pensacola, John McCain was a womanizer and party boy. I think he's got out of that Annapolis situation, got to flight school, and got to North Florida, and all. So anyway, so, you know, many of us have said to our children, if you have children, or maybe you remember somebody saying this to you, I didn't raise you to act that way. That's what I mean by who you are and how you choose to live. McCain has emphasized that he discovered how to act when he was in suffering in the Hanoi Hilton. It was in suffering, and often it is through our suffering, brothers and sisters, that we discover who we are, children of light. The suffering may be self-imposed because we've been people of the darkness, and we discover I don't belong here when the price is paid. In John McCain's case, he didn't deserve what happened to him. He was shot down, but it was unwanted suffering and undeserved suffering, but suffering nonetheless is often where you become who you're called to be. You rediscover that. All right, so this is the comparison that's being made, and spiritual growth, when you think about it, is awakening to sobriety. And I thought about the movie 28 Days. Sandra Bullock's character, who dries out in rehab, she becomes more aware of herself. Even the images of her in the movie I found on the internet, where she's in a daze when she's an uncontrolled alcoholic, and the brightness and the attentiveness to herself and to others around her as she awakens to sobriety is so clear in that movie. Now, verse 8 starts to tell us about the choices we make. Since we belong to the day, let us be self-controlled, putting on faith and love as a breastplate, and the hope of salvation as a helmet. So this ought to sound a little familiar, because in Ephesians chapter 6, the Apostle Paul goes into great detail describing the armor of God. You remember that? Putting on all the aspects of a Roman soldier's armor. Here he limits it to talking about the helmet and the breastplate, and he describes them faith, love, and hope. The first step for us to take every day to claim who we are, is to put on the armor. And I think you do it in the morning in your first prayer, in your morning. You consciously put on your faith, put on your love, put on the hope. And of course by putting on, I mean you're claiming the faith, love, and hope that comes from beyond you. You put it on. You claim your identity. It's like putting on your colors, But in spiritually speaking, it's putting on your armor, because that's your jabbing at the chest and whacking at the head are the evil one's greatest ways to hurt you. And so knowing who you are in Christ, your faith, I will not be grounded. And to hear Reese talk about that, she obviously put on her breastplate this morning, and you put on your helmet this morning, because you were not talking about, I am strong enough to do this. You said what God will do in me. And that is the first step in going from, that's who I am, but am I going to claim it and be who I am in my choices? And you did that this morning. Now, another part of all this is a shift that takes place, and let's look at verses 9. Actually, what verses 9 does is tell us more about the hope of salvation. It summarizes it. For God did not appoint us to suffer wrath, but to receive salvation through our Lord Jesus Christ. He died for us so that whether we are awake or asleep, we may live together with him. Therefore, encourage one another and build each other up, just as in fact you are doing. So the shift we see is that he's saying, since you've got this faith, hope, and love that comes from beyond you, and you're putting it on, and he summarizes the hope of salvation in Jesus Christ, who died for you and was raised in power for you no matter what you face. Then he makes a shift, and he says, therefore, encourage one another and build each other up. The shift is being awake, being sober isn't just self-protection. Being awake and sober is giving your attention to others, looking beyond yourself, not being self-absorbed. You focus on yourself long enough to know where your hope is, but then you don't stay there. You shift to being concerned about others. And that's what's so clear here. that we give that attention. Verse 6:6, we're not going to be like others who are asleep. Let us be awake and sober. And then verse 11, therefore. Whenever you see therefore in the Bible, you got to ask yourself, what's the there for? Why is it there? It's because that's where he's headed. Encourage one another and build each other up. Anybody recognize that photo from a movie? That's an oldie movie. That is a long time movie. It's still out there. I found it's still out there. Robin Williams and Robert De Niro. Awakenings. Yep. So in this movie, before we see a clip from it, in this movie, Robin Williams plays the part of Dr. Malcolm Sayer. It takes place in the summer of '69. Not an incidental time in our nation's history. Summer of '69. Dr. Sayer was working at a hospital in the Bronx, New York City, with people who had been catatonic for decades. They were victims of the encephalitis lethargica epidemic that started in 1918 and went to nearly 1930. And this hospital floor was full. This is, of course, based on a true story. The book was written before the movie was made. Dr. Sayer was looking with these people that they were not in comas. They could walk and move around. They were catatonic because of the damage done by the encephalitis to their neurons in their brain. So Dr. Sayer was experimenting with a form of dopamine, L-Dopa medication. And by experimenting, he brought them back to consciousness. They awakened, many of them after 20, 30, and the main character, Leo, 40 years of being catatonic. As a little boy, now a man in his 50s, he awakens. And so here's what it's like when Leonard, played by Robert De Niro, awakens to life after 40 years.
Baby's fishing for green, fishing near, safely safe, out upon the sea. Only don't forget to sail back again to me.
What a wonderful place the Bronx has become. That's my school.
Really?
Not classical.
You can pick any different type of music you want.
What's that?
It's rock and roll.
Huh?
Love runs high in this time. Give it to me easy and let me try with pleasured hands to take you in the sun to promised lands, to show you everyone. It's the time of the season for love. What's your name? Who's your daddy? Is he rich like me? Does he take us anytime to show you what you need to live? Tell it to me slowly. Tell you why I really want to know. It's the time of the season for love.
that happened while you've been away. It's called pollution. I don't think this is wise, Leonard. Leonard, that's not wading, that's swimming. Come on, Leonard. Leonard, I don't know if the hospital's covered for this. Oh, Leonard.
Come on!
No, not.
Come on in!
Oh, Leonard, the tide's coming in.
Leonard? Leonard?
Dr. Sayer, sit down. Sit down.
Why? What's wrong?
We've got to tell everybody. We've got to remind them. We've got to remind them how good it is.
How good what is, Leonard?
Read the newspaper. What's it say? All bad. It's all bad. People have forgotten what life is all about. They've forgotten what it is to be alive. They need to be reminded. They need to be reminded about what they have and what they can lose. And what I feel is the joy of life, the gift of life, the freedom of life, the wonderment of life.
Isn't that a great illustration of what spiritual awakening is like? You know, whether or not, for whatever reason people are slumbering, whatever reason why their senses are dulled to what matters most if they're drunk, as if they were drunk. The idea that somehow you're awakened, and that's what we mean when we say a relationship with Jesus Christ, that you're awakened. And you look at life, and even if it's the Bronx, hey, you didn't stay there, honey. But I think it's cool, the diversity and the beauty of the Bronx, you know, and of course, great place now. And but you know, no matter what, you know, life is beautiful. It's wondrous. It's of joy, and that's what you see. And that's our mission. That's our calling for ourselves, first of all, claiming the faith, hope, and love. And then to look around us and to start with the people we have relationships with, which is what the church was always meant to be. Not big buildings of lots of people that love to hear a guy talk, but relationships. And to attend to each other. And to even help people who aren't yet awakened come out of their slumber, come out of their spiritual drunkenness, I guess you'd say. So to close out this section, the apostles give 8 exhortations to the Thessalonians. So this is what fully awake disciples do, okay? Fully awake disciples do. First of all, I like the way it's first. You acknowledge those who work hard among you, who care for you in the Lord, and admonish you. That would be me. Fully awake disciples know whether or not it's a person who is a life group leader or missional community leader, but recognize there are people who are called to shepherd the flock. And it's just too bad that many times in church, if a pastor considers the possibility of admonishing somebody, I'm out of here. I'm out of here. Because fully awake disciples say, I need people to help me see what I might have a blind spot to. The thing that went wrong, you know, in the past is that it's not a one-way street. You all are supposed to help me be fully awake also. All right, also, live in peace with one another. Warn those who are idle and disruptive. Encourage the disheartened. Help the weak. Be patient with everyone. Make sure that nobody pays back wrong for wrong. So you get in someone's face when you think they're handling conflict or hurt the wrong way. Always strive to do what is good for each other and for everyone else. So that's what the Lord expects us to do for each other as we are awakening, as we are embracing spiritual sobriety. And you see that the relational impact of the gospel, we're more awakened to our own selves and to each other. Now the last point is, of course, to be sober and awake, you got to beware of the intoxicants. So I've got a list of intoxicants. These are all intoxicants. Screen addiction. I see, you know, a lot of people including church people, seem to be struggling with the possibility of a TV, a tablet, or a phone controls them, and they're not with others because of that. Facebook, I found that picture. Facebook has special potential to be like the up-the-nose drug, right? Living the good life, like constant travel in the bottom left-hand corner, has that potential. Worshiping money, if money devalues relationships. And, oh yes, of course, actual intoxicants, alcohol, drugs, porn. These are all things. Now, every one of them up there, none of them are inherently evil. Nothing there is inherently evil. And you all know we have a ministry called Bible on Tap, you know. So we don't say anything's inherently evil, you know. The problem is that they all have a parasitic, predatory desire to kind of get what we like about them, and then to us to be becoming asleep, becoming drunk, becoming numb to the Spirit and to the others around us. So just be aware, every one of us is vulnerable, perhaps to a substance. And some have had to deal with that and draw a red line and, you know, about a substance. And every, you know, whether it's Facebook use or vacations or whatever, we all have to figure out where's my vulnerability and how do I draw boundaries, balance, so that the good thing doesn't become a thing that's making me numb or inattentive to others. I think what goes wrong in marriages, what goes wrong in relationships between children, parents, what goes wrong with neighbors, workplace, has a lot to do with the intoxicants that keep people from being alert and awake to each other. So Jesus is coming, church. Stay alert. Stay sober. In every way, stay sober. Put on the armor and attend to your brethren. So let me invite the musicians up and share that, you know, we are, what is really powerful about our many of the things that have been happening is there's been a lot of authenticity about ways, you know, with some of us with each other, about the ways that we have to be careful about the things that will numb us. And so as we're singing our final song, I invite you to remember about following Jesus, meaning a decision to stay awake and stay alert.